dominance and submissiveness, something you've also written about. What's the role of that inside relationships, about this human dynamic of dominance and submissiveness? Um, is that a feature or a bug? So the stable state that these dynamical systems arrive at, is it good to have an equality within a relationship, or is it good to have differences in a relationship?
Are you talking about romantic relationships or just in human relationships?
Romantic, probably, because unless it could be generalized to human relationships, perhaps it could be generalized to human relationships. I wasn't thinking that, but perhaps it could be. But let's start with romantic. I guess one-on-one.
I'm personally in favor of equality on that dimension within romantic relationships, and in I don't talk about my personal life, but I've been in relationships, and the best ones tend to be those where there's equality, and one person does not dominate the other. But I guess the reason I ask you is in what type of relationships, because there's some things like coalitions where hierarchy is very important to the function of the coalition. So it's like if you're like a war coalition or something in small group warfare, you can't just have equality. You have to have leaders that are determining the battle plan, so to speak. And so if you have you're attacking a neighboring group or something, and everyone gets an equal say, it's not going to work that way. And so we tend to appoint as leaders those who are doesn't always work out well, but those who are presumably wise or good, effective leaders. And they even talk about, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, and I'm not an expert on this, but wartime leaders versus peacetime leaders. And so again, it depends on what the goal is of the group that you are a part of. And so I think there is functionality and utility to a lot of our evolved psychology of status and dominance and submissiveness. So, for example, and you have to look at the individual psychology, and this is actually something I'm currently studying again with Patrick Durkee, where one advantage of these status hierarchies is that you're not always battling. So you determine, and that's why. Here's another sexually dimorphic aspect of our psychology: formidability assessment. So there's evidence that males engage in this. Can I take this guy, or can he take me? And it's like
the entirety of my life. Yes,
it's like a spontaneous assessment of formidability, and it also that information is critical, because that means like who you should not challenge, or who you can challenge with impunity. So and there's functionality to submitting as well, because you defer to someone so that you don't get vanquished and you live to see another day. So I think we actually have a very rich psychology of status hierarchies and dominance and submissiveness.
So especially sort of violent conflict. Yes. But back to relationships. So maybe phrased another way, what is masculinity? What is femininity? Is there value inside a relationship for differences? You talked about mating strategies with the dating stage where you're selecting the mate, but also within, mating broadly defined as the entirety of the process. Should those differences be magnified and celebrated, or sort of suppressed?
I've seen enough different relationships work, and I've seen enough relationships implode to say there's not one size fits all on these things. So even with respect to masculinity and femininity, some reduce it psychologically to two other terms, which are agency and communion. So where agency is, are you instrumental, goal oriented, get tasks done, etc. Communion is, more the love and forming connections with other people and so forth. And I published a study a while back on what's called unmitigated agency and unmitigated communion. So there are like good and bad aspects of agency and communion. So
They can go. So there's toxic, as they say, masculinity, toxic femininity. You can just rephrase that saying there could be toxic agency and toxic communion.
yeah, yeah, and so some elements of masculinity, the unmitigated masculinity is, I think, terrible. I was actually walking around downtown Austin earlier today, and I was give you this example, and this guy was, I guess, stuck and wanted the car ahead of him to move, and all of a sudden he screamed out of his move your fucking car,
Yeah.
like, and then jumped out of his car and to approach the other guy. And to me, that's toxic masculinity, if you will. We don't need that,
Yeah. So, and by the way, as somebody who worked with cars quite a long time in terms of human interaction with semi-autonomous vehicles, it's so fascinating how the car and traffic brings out like the worst in human nature, in a sense, or maybe to rephrase that, it maybe challenges you to explore something that, in terms of temper, in terms of anger, in terms of anxiety, that you have been bottling it up. There's something that where the car is like a vessel for a psychological experiment of how much stress you can take. And some people, that stress is like heating, is making the water boil. And it's fascinating to see what that results in. I think if you are the kind of person that explodes emotionally in traffic, that means there's deeper issues to sort of confront. And it seems like the traffic and the car is a place where you get to confront the shadow, Carl Jung's shadow. There's something deep within that we don't often fish. We're alone with ourselves, and we get to see who we truly are.
Yeah. Well, it can bring out road rage. And also there's this, I don't know, when you're in the vehicle, you have this shell around you. And so there's this feeling that you are protected from.
Yes. So you could be yourself. You can be your true self in this moment. And sometimes that true self in this moment is an angry, screaming person, which means you have to introspect that shadow, shine a light.